What do you think of when you think of mental illness? Most of us have seen them in the movies or on the streets. Maybe they are in our family or even ourselves. All of us have probably been touched in some way by mental illness. Throughout history, the mentally ill have been part of the fabric of our society. I am particularly interested in how religion and culture have influenced mental illness around the world. In China, before the 20th century, mental disorders were treated with traditional Chinese medicine. They were classified as Dian, or psychosis, Kuang, or mania, and Jian, or epilepsy. The book The Yellow Emperor, written around 475 BC, systematically described symptoms and treatment. The theory of the 5 elements is important in understanding the treatment of mental illness in China. The 5 elements, fire, earth, metal, water, and wood, emphasize the relationship between the physical organs and the emotional state. The theory is that by balancing the life force, or qi, one can attain both physical and emotional health.
The qi is like a vital energy in our body, and this vital energy you have to stimulate or you have to calm down. If you have fear, but too much fear will harm our gallbladder channel. If too much anger will harm our liver channel. Even too much joy can affect our heart channel. What we do is we treat these channels and also invigorate this channel and also invigorate the blood circulation, and patient feel balance.
As China progressed and opened its doors to more Western influences, they developed their own manual in 1979 titled The Chinese Classification of Mental Disorders. And just like the Western Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, updates are made every few years. What is interesting about the Chinese Diagnostic Manual is that at least 40 diagnoses are deemed culturally specific. For example, a mental disorder exists specific to a practitioner of Qigong, with the symptoms including the inability to stop doing it. Another example is Koro, which is an excessive fear of the genitals or breasts shrinking into the body. This can be found in cultures or subcultures that place emphasis on fertility or reproduction. Remember that China imposes the one-child birth limit with strict fines or sterilization if not adhered to. Also of note is that with China's current push toward progress and economic virility, there has been a rise in depression and suicide.
My name's June. I was born in China and I finished my college in China and went to the States. I did not really enjoy my experience growing up in China because people always came up to me and told me that you think too much, think about things that kids usually didn't think about here in China. My mom was constantly making requests to me, asking me to think less. I think the confusions and the troubles I had in the States are more, I would call it more healthy, because it's more you're on your self-search, of you searching for yourself. But here, most troubles you feel is coming from your failure to satisfy other people. And I think the needs for religion is obvious. People need someone as strong as Mao Zedong, who were so convincing, who were so respected that everybody treated him as God. People need a new God, but new God can never come back as a political leader. That's for sure, because people are not stupid anymore. We have internet. In theory, everybody's equal in front of God. Well, confusion is to think people with virtues are better than those who are not. But to gain virtues, you need to read, you need to think. Not everybody's like that. I had a nervous breakdown several months ago when I was finishing up my law school. My doctor, she said I had too many demons from my past. All Chinese parents, they think taking care of kids mostly means that you feed them, you make sure they have good clothes and better TV, a bigger house. That means love. they're not very familiar with kids' emotional needs. To them, kids are not supposed to have ideas until they're at least 20. My friend's mother was suffering from insanity because of the political, reasons, because they had a second child, which was against the policy. In terms of financial, success, they're very poor. My friend still cannot find a job. All that's the price they have to pay. So in the communist system, once you demonstrate your free will, that you would go against the will of the party, then you're pretty much finished.
Along with everything else, psychiatry is booming in China. In a rare opportunity, we were allowed to visit a psychiatric hospital in Chenzhou in the southern Hunan province.
他是20岁到40岁左右的，他可能不到这不出来的话，有可能不会发病。他就是很多病人到大城市了，就是这个花花世界，人家有钱，他没钱。还有就是上班的时候受老板的是工作压力大，才导致发病。
What sorts of delusions does he hear about?
就说一般都是听到好像有人议论他，讲他的怪话这些，就说业内性幻听啊，品类性幻听比较多一些。
Are there any delusions that incorporate being something religious?
有，他就是这种是一般都是与迷信有关的，这些病人还是有的。
What sort of treatments do they use besides medication?
那些恢复期的病人进行心理治疗，还有我们那个电针治疗。我们专门有个公益室，就说像有些病人他可能大便比较紧啊，火气比较大，这些可以用这种一种辅助用药。
I don't see mentally ill people out on the streets. Why?
城市里面有时也会这城市里面也会有了，他有时离家出走啊这些。
We were not allowed to interview the patients or see their treatment rooms, so I asked a US-based Chinese psychiatrist and professor of traditional Chinese medicine what he had witnessed while practicing in China.
Most common diagnosis for someone have emotional problems. We more consider this diagnosis referring to physical fatigue and depressed feelings, and rather than severe mental disorders. According to Chinese culture, and any person does like to be labeled by mental illness because it will affect their regular life.
Do you feel that the culture has contributed to this anxiety disorder?
Parents only have one child and put a lot of efforts and hope on this child, which can make people have a mental illness.
What does this illness look like?
For some patients, if they have paranoid, for example, they assume they did something wrong because I rent out my property to someone else and ask them to pay the rent. I'm not supposed to do that. This is definitely related to culture because during the Cultural Revolution, a lot of people who are landlord, you own the property, that you will have a problem. And that still remains some people's mind, particularly elderly. They went through the Cultural Revolution. They still have a very deep mark in their mind. Patients from a city, most people have a certain education. When they have a mental illness, their hallucination or their paranoid has more related to culture. Some farmers don't have enough education. Probably some people never go to school. When they have a mental illness, come to hospital, they more show you behavior disorders. For example, for a city person, they can consider some electronic stuff or ultrasound controlling behavior. For the countryside person, maybe they believe their girlfriend or wife are dating with someone else. It's more simple. Shaman and witches still have their own market. If they see the shaman may help them because it's more considered like a psychotherapy. If it's severe mental illness, shaman may not help them so much. Also, sometimes create more problems. I think religion sometimes when people need get spiritual support, but you believe too much sometimes maybe create confusion. Some Chinese herbal medicine and the Chinese and acupuncture points we use to treat this kind of patient can calm their spirits.
How do people pay for their treatment in China?
Most of the patients when I work in China, the government paid the treatment, and some patients, like farmers, they don't have insurance; they pay themselves. If someone have a company, have working for government, like a government employee, the government pay them treatment.
Do the government employees go to the same hospital as the common person? I'm just curious. With the communist regime still in power, political dissidents are picked up and hospitalized indefinitely with the accusation of mental illness. Few wish to speak of this in China, and even those living here in the U.S. are fearful of repercussions on their family members still residing in China.
Some patients, you cannot just stick needles, it's impossible. And sometimes the patient, I don't know why, because we do integrated treatment. Medicine works very well. Just let them talk and have an open mind talk. They get better faster.
When people grow up in China, if they have mental illness, for example, like depression, they probably think about themselves lost value for this country.
It's quite common for the first generation immigrants, especially for people coming from less developed countries. They would always have this crisis through comparison. They try to cut their ties with their own culture, but then got lost, stuck in between. I wish there are more doctors out there understanding the whole situation. I really want to have inner peace. I've struggled so much, but I think I've really seen myself making the progress that I want to see. That is, I don't judge myself through other people's eyes anymore.
My goal with this series is to take a brief look at how religion and culture influence the differences and similarities in the diagnosis and treatment of the mentally ill. I also want to ask the bigger question, what is madness? Is it more about what you do rather than what you think, and who you can get to follow you? I want us to ask what works, what doesn't, and how we can learn from one another to help alleviate the suffering that seems to know no boundaries. Please continue to join me as we explore mental illness around the world.